Alrighty. Hey everyone, welcome back to the pod. Here we go behind the scenes with founders, builders, and creators who have been shipping to build the future of AI or any product. Right. Today we have with us Ani. I have known Ani for a long while. We have worked together as well. And he is someone who is not too much present on the social media, but he has been building quietly behind the scenes and actually built some crazy stuff. And yeah, would love to have audience some context and you're up for intro, man.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Marshall. Yeah, so I've basically been in the tech startups space since college. I initially started a startup during my college called DormDash, and what we were trying to do is we were trying to do what DoorDash did, but for college campuses. The pain point was that if you have normal delivery drivers, they're not allowed inside the campus, like they can't go inside the dorm without the ID. So there's a lot of situations where students would have to go all the way down to the building or outside the building just to pick up their food. And we thought that was a big enough pain point where we can just get students to do this within campus restaurants and then go inside and deliver right in front of like the classroom or right inside your dorm. And I worked on this for like 2 years, and unfortunately, COVID happened and campuses shut down. So we kind of that kind of just like dwindled down. But that was my first like experience into the startup space. Loved it so much, and just like the I guess the satisfaction of like seeing something you built being used by like people and seeing the potential of it is really like the high of it is really like good to chase. So I kept continuing it, and then I started High Five, which brought like digital tipping and financial services to the hospitality sector, especially during COVID. They were hit the most, like hotels, and they were having a lot of staff retention problems. So what we did was we were providing like these retention HR softwares to hotels and try to like incentivize people to stay on the property more. And yeah, done that for like 2, 3 years, and we did a lot of impact there. And then now I'm on the founding team of Spur, and we're building AI QA engineers. Very exciting space, it's expanding every day. So hopefully, we can disrupt that market.
Interesting. So you have had a pretty good journey starting from DoorDash and doing that, building a first product, right, and then coming here. And what do you think? Usually in college, people are like looking forward to a job. What do you think is was the reason that you got into building your own thing?
Yeah, no, this is a good question. I'd say like really first like the light bulb moment for me was in high school.
Hmm.
Like I was just a normal I was like learn CS, like program, like learn Java or something, get a job, and then go down that route. But then in high school, I remember there was this one senior who had built
Hmm.
this app. It was called Easy Tutor, and
Hmm.
what they did was it was just like a marketplace, but connecting student tutors with students who are looking for tutoring. So people who've already done the class before they could just go tutor them, right? And that was the first time I really saw someone just like, build something of their own and then send it to, or like build it for other people with the knowledge they've gained, right? I've built like, apps, I've built like scripts, like random stuff to just solve my own problems, but I never really thought about it in a way to where it's solving something that's big enough for other people. I always thought, you had to be like a professional or company, you had to like, have a team or, you need to be professional to do that. And that was the first unlock I had. Like, we have the skill set to do it. And if you really think about it, that is the biggest opportunity cost for students. Like, when you have the skills that you're learning and you're not putting it to use, like that's where you're gonna unlock the most value out of it, in my opinion, right? So that's when I really started like, thinking more in terms of like, hey, I learned all these tools, all these skills. What can I do to solve a problem that a lot of people have? And when you start thinking like that, there's opportunities everywhere. And now once you find these opportunities and you work towards them, you
Hmm.
no longer have like the thought process of, hey, let me just settle for a job, because you're now just automatically by default dreaming way bigger.
And how did you, with this mindset, because you knew you wanted to start with solving your own problems, and then you were looking through problems, what made you like finalize working on this idea? Because I'm sure like you had a bunch of ideas to work on. How did you land on this one?
Yeah, I mean it's a bunch of trial and errors. I know like if you're on Twitter like recently, like you see all these like indie hackers, they're just building like a new startup every week, every month.
Every month.
Yeah, there is some truth to that. You need to like pivot fast. If an idea doesn't work, you need to move. But I really think like if you just narrow down your scope of ideas like to do, like you need to do the idea that you have an I guess an advantage in inherent advantage. Like founder market fit is very like not talked about. I feel like everyone just talks about product market fit. Founder market fit, all that means, what it means is basically the problem you're trying to solve, you need to have some kind of advantage that you believe that you are like the person who can like solve it, right? Compared to another person who is just doing it for like, just monetary reasons for, right? For example, because I'm like super into like tech and finance, I believe I would have an advantage if I go more into a domain related to fintech, right?
Mm.
Because inherently, like all the random stuff I did, this like random stuff I look up online, read just out of my own curiosity, will just subconsciously just feed into like the domain that I'm trying to solve into, right? So I just have more knowledge than another person. I'm just starting way ahead in that field. So when you're thinking about an idea to choose, start from there, narrow down your scope, and then from there, you just go do trial and error, right? You pick up idea, you do an MVP, talk to your users. There's the famous Paul Graham, like, the blog post that everyone refers to. I think that everyone should read that and figure out like how to do things that don't scale, just ship it out fast, just validate it and don't have any emotional attachments to the project you did. Like if the market is not accepting it, just reiterate, don't just be stubborn and be like, oh, this is the way to do. It works out sometimes, but just statistics, like, you're going to be exceptional.
Cool. And when you did this and you finalized the problem and you're like, okay, I can go for this. How did it 2 years look? Because you ran it for 2 years, then COVID happened, you shut down. But the active 2 years where everything was offline, how did those look and what was your journey from idea to the first dollar?
So yeah, that one was an interesting one because we were always pre-revenue. We never made a single dollar. It's because like
Okay.
we had to work with universities and like we had to get permissions and all this stuff, and that was a long process. And the second we got it, campus is shut down, so we couldn't even put it into
Oh.
use. Also, like yeah, picking your ideas. So for example, that one we were students and we had the background to build the application. Like we were technical, so we didn't have to like go find someone or pay someone to build it. So we had like an advantage in that sense. So to where we were closer to the audience, the target market, where and we had the skill set to do it ourselves. So that's why I picked that idea. And also I had a problem. Like I faced the pain point myself numerous times, right? So I had also the ambition and passion to solve that problem, right? So
Yeah.
that's why we picked it. But yeah, if you want to keep reiterating, also pick things that you don't need regulation on because a lot of things are not in your hand. Even with fintech, like even with high five, so many different regulation stuff.
Cool. So you did that product, you worked through that for 2 years, COVID happened. Um, and okay, so this is interesting. I always had this fascination. When you take that call or you are going through that phase that this product might not work, there might be a phase when you're like on the tip side that this might work, might not. What made you take the call that okay, let's call it shut?
I might have an interesting answer to this. I think you just have to be delusional to a certain degree. You always by default have to have like I just said don't be stubborn, but there is some truth to like deluding yourself in a way to where if you're confused like, yeah, this might work, this might not work 50-50, almost always pick the path that hey, this is going to work until you're super certain it's not going to work. So just delude yourself into believing you're the one to solve this problem and you have what it takes. Because a lot of people, I think the problem is like they get like what do you call it? They just like lose motivation really fast. They lose interest because they're getting all these obstacles. They're getting stopped along the way. I think if you delude yourself into really like thinking you're the one to do it, that'll get you over that initial slump, and after that, momentum will just take you forward.
I think my question was in the sense like, when do you think is the right time to call it quits on building a product? And secondly, as well, I wanted to know then that I think when you call quits on a product, and because you have been building it for almost 2 years, you might go into some kind of direction crisis, if I may say that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, traditionally speaking, like if you raise money and all this stuff for your idea, and then 2 years later you realize it's not working out,
Hmm.
it's very easy to see that because you don't have money in the bank and you have no money coming in, so you know it's not working out. But a lot of times, I think instead of calling it completely quits, there's a lot of merit in just pivoting to a different thing,
Hmm.
right? Calling it quits, I think, rarely ever happens. A lot of people just pivot and they change the idea like, dramatically to where it kind of works, and then from there fix it furthermore to fully work. I think fully calling it quits would mean like you're throwing in the towel. You're like you don't have any bandwidth left to keep it moving, or you need to find a newer team or find a newer problem, completely different domain to solve because you weren't the right person to solve this one.
So after this chapter of your life, you went on to be the CTO of i5. So how did that come to happen? What was the journey? And also shed some light on the Techstars chapter. Like how did you
Yes,
meet
yeah,
uh, the whole team? How did that happen?
yeah. That was also an interesting story. Initially, so there's two co-founders for High Five, Aman and Naman, and they started this thing called TipX, right? And they were based out of College Station, Texas, near Austin, and I'm based out of Dallas, Texas, and we've never met each other, right? And
Okay.
I separately had the same idea, and I was working towards it, and I'm the technical person. I'm a technical person, right? So I was building it out, and they're both non-technical. They're more on the sales and operations side of things. And then I just, I was doing some competitor research on LinkedIn, or just see who else is working on this. And then I came across TipX, and I thought it was really interesting and could be like a good fit. Like if, it's very complementary. Like I'm a technical person. They both have sales and operations experience. That would be like the perfect, like, founding team, dream team to solve this problem we're trying to go after, right? So I just cold DM'd on LinkedIn, and I said I introduced myself, and I just told them what I'm working on, and if they're open to like collaboration or like merging both of our entities, and that's what we did. And High Five became reality, and that's how we kind of started together. During while I was joining, while we were like integrating everything together, both the companies, we started applying to Techstars. For people who are not familiar with Techstars, it is just like Y Combinator, but it's like more globally like spread out. So instead of just everything in SF like Y Combinator, they have like more like cities where they do things. Like we have Austin chapter, we have Boston chapter, Seattle. Like they just have more cities they cover. So we applied to Techstars, and then we got interviewed, and then we got in as one of the cohorts during COVID. It's a 2022. So this is
So
right
you
after
got
COVID where
in
everything is.
within your first attempt.
So they've applied once as Tipex, and then they got deferred. Like, hey, like they were like refine your business model a little bit more, and then we applied again as High Five, and then we got it.
And what do you think was like? What did you think you did better the second time that helped you get in?
Just like more clarity on what you want to do. Originally, we didn't have we were originally the plan was actually LinkedIn for service workers, like the way it was going. Like we were initially fintech, and then we changed it to doing more like resume style for like people, service workers, like who are hourly workers, right? So like getting their experience from previous companies, employers, and like showing, compiling it all in like one LinkedIn like thing. But that didn't work out, and then we pivoted back into what was working, which was the fintech aspect of it, and we just doubled down on it, right? We were just instead of when they ask you about your vision, instead of saying, oh, we could maybe do this, maybe do that, we had a more concrete like, hey, we are 100% going to do this, and this is why we think so. You might be wrong, you might be completely wrong, but having that conviction is what I think really matters.
For anyone who is watching, if they want to apply for Techstars, if you could just give three tips, maybe.
For Techstars, yeah, I mean, like I said, founder market fit is important. Like everyone looks for that. Like, why do you think you're the person to solve this problem that you set out to? And when I say founder market fit, it's not just you; it's also the founding team. So your co-founder, any other original team members, because the early team is what kind of makes or breaks the company. Like the first, like I think 10 employees, I would say first five, but YC kind of says first 10, like they kind of determine like the culture of the company. Like it's just a cumulative experience of everyone that kind of gives you that advantage to go after this, right? The founder market fit super important, and a second, at least have like a working like MVP, would say, like just because you don't have to make revenue, but at least show that you've talked to your users, you've at least shipped something out, and
Hmm.
you have some sort of, you've shown that you listen to your customers and you're like reiterating you're actively working towards product market fit. And number three is, like I said, having that conviction and clarity on where you want to take the idea. Like, what's your end game? How are you going to get there? And have some sort of like data, statistics to back it up and show like your experience and how you can do that.
So does this process also include like making a pitch deck with time and everything?
Yeah, they do. I think we did have like a whole presentation, but we do like verbally talk through it. It's like an exercise you do where you just they just ask you questions about like, hey, what's the TAM? Like, what do you think? How much do you think you can penetrate? Like what is like once you achieve like your vision, what do you think is going to be like the worldview? Like all this very like big picture stuff. You definitely have to think through and have clarity on.
Interesting. Yep.
Yeah, because a
Cool.
lot of
So,
times, like when you talk about Techstars and YC, right, Y Combinator, they're in the business of trying to find the next big thing, right? You're not,
hmm.
they're not gonna like sure, you could have like a business that works great for you and like small like team or small business, but they're really trying to fund and bring in people who dream big and can like do moonshot ideas and execute on them. So you really need to think about when you get to that realm of things, really need to think about how the world view is going to change when you succeed in what you set out to do. For example, Airbnb, no one like wanted strangers in their house, but they set
Hmm.
out to change that, and now the world view is different, right? Like everyone's thinking differently because of that, right? So if these moonshot ideas are like when you're like tackling these moonshot ideas, that's a thought process you need to definitely have clarity on.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. And you got into Techstar. How was the journey inside Techstar? Because everyone is like always interested to know what's the inside of these intense incubators, accelerators.
It was very intense. I will say that. I know Y Combinator is very like not as hands-on. Like I know they have like once a week or twice a week meetings, and those are very intense. But we had like a structured like in Techstars we had a whole 3 months of like structured plan every day. We're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, and they basically like teach you how to like run a business as non-business people. And we had this thing called Mentor Madness, where for a whole like 2 3 weeks, 8 hours a day, we just met with a new person every 10 minutes, and
For
it was basically teaching you. Yeah, it was basically giving you the reps and experience to like pitch your idea in with under 10 minutes, and try to like find advisors. So these are all mentors and advisors, people who want to like connect with the startups and like decide on who they want to mentor and advise. And you have to pick like 10 people, and then they kind of like match you with the people who are interested. And to do that process, we had to talk to like 200, 300 people. And every 10 minutes, you just pitch yourself. 5 minutes pitch, 5 minutes Q&A. And you keep doing this over and over for like 2 3 weeks. At the end of it, on obviously will get better at it. So it's just a process of like doing it over and over.
so it's like speed dating for founders and advisors.
Yeah, yep. That's exactly how it is. Very intense.
Interesting. Interesting. So you had that. Any other special highlights?
Yeah, the we really learned a lot. Like they brought like people, ex-Techstars alums who are building like these unicorns, right? They come in to give talks about their experience. It's also very down low, so like it's not published anywhere. It's like just,
Hmm.
very raw and like original thoughts.
Hmm.
And we learn a lot, like, how like cutthroat and competitive the landscape is, and like how like
Hmm.
stuff, what are some business stuff like they don't really teach you in textbooks, and what you can do, how to like be the outlier and like think differently in terms of capturing your market. Like all these like advantages, strategies that they share were really helpful and were a highlight for me.
Interesting. So I'm assuming after the 3 months you came out a different person.
Yeah, I had a different outlook on how startups work, for sure.
Oh, what was that in a crux? What really changed? What was like the total shift?
It was primarily like you need to have a lot of high agency. That's what it is. Like you don't stop and question, like analyze everything and like question like whether what you're doing is right or wrong. Just do it and then see what happens. I think that it's very simple to say, but it's very like hard to implement when the time comes. And I think that was my biggest takeaway of the whole experience. Just like
Hmm.
when you're confused about or when you're like not uncertain about doing certain things, I just do it and I just see what happens. Because you can afford to be wrong and still fix it because you're so small. You're moving. Your whole idea is to move fast and break things. Like very cliche saying from Facebook back in the day, but really what gives startups the advantage is moving fast.
But I think as a founder, it becomes hard to detach yourself from the output. Where like if you get wrong one time, you beat yourself up for that, and consecutively, if something like that happens, that starts to drip into your personal, your self image as well. I think yeah, that's a hard thing to do, like detaching yourself and just like keeping at it. So that happened, and then you started with High Five, right? So and that was how long of a journey?
That was 3 to 4 years. I took like a more backseat these days, so I'm not more of an active operator. I'm more like technical advisor type role right now. There's some exciting things happening in High Five. I just unfortunately can't share in this podcast, but there's some good news that's gonna like come out hopefully soon on social media.
Awesome. I look forward to that. Cool. So you had a high five chapter, and at that time you were mostly handling the tech side of things. And what kind of products you built, and other than that, how big was the team? And after coming out of Techstar, how did your perspective change as a technical person?
So one criticism I have of Techstars is it's not there. Wasn't any real anything specific for technical people. It was mostly a business, and it was mostly like if you're a founder CEO, I think you would gain the most as the CTO and technical person. There was still stuff they were teaching you, but me personally, I already knew those coming in, so I didn't gain much value out of it. But it's the people you surround yourself with, I think, is very important as well. So yeah, I think as a technical person, you kind of just have to be always like, I'm always on tech Twitter, so I always know like what's happening in the industry. So having that like kind of like insight where the industry is moving and what are people working on, I think it's very useful.
Interesting. And I think a lot of founders struggle with this debate of like architecting their software in a best manner so that they go into a analysis paralysis of like how to make it, what stack to make in, and like sometimes they under engineer, sometimes they over engineer. So what do you think about that?
Like I said, Paul Graham essay, do things that don't scale is very like true. Don't think about, hey, like technically if I have a million users, this architecture won't really work. Don't worry about that. Uh, you can honestly just start off just building everything in SQLite, for example,
Hmm.
and worry about scaling to like something else once you hit the limitations, right? Don't really like over engineer. There's a lot of free tools these days, right? Supabase, you have Clerk. They're solving all these different problems technology wise, like on the tech stack. Just use them to the point where they're actually burning a hole in your wallet, and then at that point decide to switch gears and try to optimize it. Otherwise, if you spend too much time optimizing, you might never live to even hit the capacity of what you optimize for.
And there are agencies as well that help build MVPs as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. So cool. And what do you think about like working as how did your role evolve from like just being a technical person to being a CTO? What stakes changed there?
So I think that's a little bit glorified. I think it's yourself, but I don't think anything really changed. Just because like you're so early stage, like everyone kind of does everything. So I just did everything plus the technical side. So the only thing that you do have to think a little bit differently from just being a technical person, I would say, is the management side of things. Like before High Five, I never had any experiences like managing, other team members to the same degree as a CTO would. So learning that, and I still think, there's a lot of stuff there that I could learn for sure. But I think that's the only difference. But other than that, like, CTO, head of engineering, all these are titles, everyone kind of does everything.
Interesting.
especially in the early stage startup.
And after that, you finally got into the Spur chapter. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so we were actually at High Five, we were using Spur. We were one of the early customers. And that's how I got introduced to the team at Spur. And when I decided to make that decision of taking a back seat and being more of a passive operator in High Five, I reached out to them, and it was like the timing was perfect because they were also just looking for a founding engineer to join their founding team, and we kind of hit it off, and our goals aligned. So then I kind of just joined Spur, moved to New York. I'm in New York, so made that jump from Texas to New York.
Hmm.
So that was crazy. And here, Spur, like everything is, the market is expanding really big, especially the AI space, right? With High Five, I was already more established market. Like I was travel sector, and we were building a B2B SaaS with the financial angle to it. So the market wasn't expanding as much, but you still had like a section carved out for yourself. Over here, you're growing with the market. You just do nothing today and you still grow just because the market is growing. There's so much momentum in this space, right? So there's just more leverage that you can do in the AI space these days, especially if you know how to build AI tooling.
Interesting. So, in a sense, like AI evolution is a spearhead, and just that the fact that you're like behind it, that gives you a lot of leverage because the space is exploding. That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah, like think about
And
it like the way I think about it, this might be weird for everyone, but the way I would think about it is like, the universe is expanding, right? So so if you do nothing, you're still like the space of it is just expanding, right? So that's kind of like the way I would think about it.
and how does your day right now look like at Spur?
It's very intense, like every startup would be, especially if you're in the AI space, there's a lot of demand, right? So we're always like constantly like a lot of interest and a lot of like customer support that you gotta have to do. Especially as an early stage startup, you don't have like the customer support team and all that. So everyone's just kind of doing everything, right? So majority of my day is just talking to customers, helping them with the product, and the other half of the day is just working on the engineering front, where I'm building newer features, fixing bugs, and thinking about the roadmap and what the customers really want, figuring out what our next 2 week pipeline's going to
I think plus on Twitter, this word founding engineer has become the thing. Like, oh, you are a founding engineer, that has become. But in actuality, it's very intense of a process itself, right? And I mean, yeah, now you're doing this, and I think you have a organization structure in place. So what's like the plan now?
be. Well, the plan now is to disrupt the QA space.
This thing,
Yeah, well, as for what we're really doing is we're building agents to kind of crawl like your web application and test every single flow that you have. And we're also working on mobile apps. So what we're doing is bringing AI to all these traditional QA tools. So as a engineer or as a product manager, you no longer need to spend that many engineering hours on QA. You can just type out what you want to test, like you're talking to
yeah.
ChatGPT, and it will just go test it for you, right? So that I think that it is a hard problem to solve, and I think that is like what my next what current and next thing is like trying to solve that problem.
Interesting. And what do you think? Do you find something different in terms of vibe or energy of systems in a YC because you're working at Fur, which is YC backed? Do you think there's any difference in the processes or uh, how should I put it? Anything you find like from all your experience, there's something different happening.
Well, if you're a YC company, I've noticed the stark like difference I've noticed really is there's a lot of inbound that you get for free. Like distribution, really like you're already such like starting so ahead. It's crazy. YC has like a huge like millions of people following it. They just put out one like post. You did nothing and you got free marketing, right? So I saw like that was a huge advantage. Like if you're ready to capitalize on all that inbound like traffic, it's a huge like head start that you get for with non-YC companies. And also just like the community, like YC has a lot of events. There's a huge startup community here in New York, and most of them are YC companies as well, right? So everyone kind of knows everyone. There's this like camaraderie and like just
Hmm.
spirit that everyone's in this together. And that is like one of the most important things when you're running a startup because everything's so uncertain. You need people around you that are also thriving in that uncertainty to kind of help you, level your head and keep going at it. So I think that's the
Interesting.
stark difference I've noticed. And also there's a lot of intensity, like I said. Right? I think that just comes down to like the founders and the founding team, but like a lot of intensity in terms of like the way you're obsessed about customers, the way you're shipping out things, especially because it's a completely tech product. Previously, it was a tech augmented product. There's two different ways about thinking on how to build a product.
And because you are highly operating in AI oriented space, and everyone, like the every second word you hear would be AI, or I'm building cursor for this, cursor for that. Yeah. So how do you see the development and software engineering domain changing? How are there going to be less jobs, or is it going to like completely get erased? And how is the scene going to evolve?
Oh, okay. I do think well, it's uncertain, right? Every year, these models are getting way better, and if you kind of project it out, like there's going to be a point where they kind of just are the best at what they do, better than a human. And I personally am more skeptical. I do think we're going to have like diminishing returns after a certain while, but the people, spending money say we're not going to hit that, but we'll see. But in general, I think with the capabilities we have today, I do think there's going to be a lesser like demand for jobs in general for software engineers. Just because like if you're a good software engineer with the tooling we have right now, you're easily equivalent to like five engineers. Like the rate of like pace we are doing at Spur is insane because we're using Cursor, we're using all these AI products. Everything is so AI integrated in our workflow that we were just four people or five people. But we're shipping a lot. And I didn't
And
think it would ever be possible to ship that much as a solo like engineer sitting here. Like I ship out like two, three features a week, for example, right? Like that's an insane level of speed. Well, you also backtrack once you make mistakes, right? So it's easier to change. You can ship out a lot, you can fix a lot, and you can ship even more. I do think like with the tooling we have today, if you're a software engineer and you're not, working with AI tooling, you might be at risk. So just think about it. Make sure, like for example, like if you're an average developer, I think really, really learn how to use AI better. That could be the best use of your time today to have that extra leverage when time comes.
interesting. And so, if we speak in a very broad horizon, there is already a AI getting built for everything, literally everything. Anything can think of, there's a cursor or there's a AI tool getting built for everything. So, in the way I have been observing the tech Twitter and YC and everything, like I cannot think of even a single domain where this dip of human employment will not happen. The only thing I see is like where the job itself requires a manual intervention or is something very trust slash emotional. What do you think? What will be the remaining, or how will the overall employment landscape across the globe change?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we're not at a stage where it's going to completely replace people. I think it's still like you still need human intervention, right? And I am skeptical on whether it will get to that point, but we will see. There's a lot of money, writing, making AI that better. But what I'm saying is globally, I think now basically what has happened, if you really think about it in layman's and simpler terms, is the leverage you used to get with learning how to code, like learning, for example, Java or Python or JavaScript, you have that same amount of leverage by just knowing English. That's all that has happened. So all you're doing right now is commoditizing like the skill set that software engineers bring to the table. And just by doing that, you will reduce like the I guess the demand for software engineers because now another person who kind of knows the technical stuff but doesn't really know how to code, but as long as they understand it, they can just type English and get it working, right? So that's what they have done. And if you keep doing that better and better with the AI stuff, you could get to a point where you never have to code again. You just need to talk in English, right? That's kind of like the worldview you're kind of asking me about. And if that happens, then yes, like things that you need more like human intervention, like human physical, like you need your body to do something. I think that that would be more valuable at that point, right? Because the AI can't get to it yet, at least with the robotics and humanoid technology.
Imagine bricklayers making more than a software engineer.
No, that also brings an interesting question now, because now if everyone is cannot do these jobs and everyone is going into like using their body to do stuff like blue collar jobs, now there's a huge supply there, so now everyone's getting paid less.
Interesting. So,
So
like,
it's very uncertain, and it's fun to think about, but honestly, no one knows what's going to happen. So the best you can do today is look at where it is today and be the best you can be, and you cannot stop the market forces. So just be in a good position when whatever happens, happens.
interesting. Lastly, I think because you have been someone who has built products in and out, and you had your journey from Techstars to YC, a lot of people who follow me are into the cursor space, vibe coding their products. So just boom out of like the mind, three tips for anyone who's building product who wants to grow their thing to 50K MRR. What comes the first three things in your mind?
Well, are these guys technical at all, or are you talking about completely non-technical people vibe coding?
I would position them as semi-technical.
Okay. Well, I would say like one thing I've noticed with vibe coding is it's really good at the front end piece of things, but it's not that great on integrating everything. From just prompting perspective. Like you need to really like you have to be semi-technical to know enough to where it didn't kind of do the back end like this way. So you need to like prompt it to do it specifically, but I have not seen it do it as like a one shot like the way it does the front end. So if you are vibe coding to the point where you're not even touching the code, just think about like how it is actually storing the information, how it is thinking through. A lot of people just use Supabase, right? But it's not as simple as that sometimes. You have to think about like, do you need to store certain information for another feature you want to build in the future, stuff like that, right? So semi-technical people are in the best position. So if you're vibe coding, at least understand the basic principle building blocks of architecture and technology. So at least you know like a rough idea like what your app is actually like running on, like the flow basically of how your app is working. And the second point is really I guess a lot of hype around like or not hype, but a lot of people are calling to action like how insecure the code that's vibe coded is. Like it's very easy to attack it. It's very like it's leaking sensitive information. There's no like guardrails in place. Anyone can abuse it easily. If you're not really explicitly asking it to solve that problem, it will completely ignore it, right? If you vibe code. So thinking about security is also an important thing, and I do think there's going to be a rise of like vibe security. I don't know if that's what they're going to
Hmm.
call it, vibe, like where it's just like cybersecurity agencies probably just helping vibe coders secure their product. I think that's another huge market that's opening up right now, just because of how many people are building actually like useful products using vibe coding. They need to protect this data and protect their app, right? So I think there's a huge demand there that can be interesting the way it plays out. And yeah, I mean, I personally don't vibe code like intensely, so I can't really relate to how these people operate. So whatever I'm saying might not even apply. But the way I kind of operate is like I'm super technical, right? So I just use Cursor a lot. Like I don't use products like Lovable, Bolt, New, or any new stuff. So I already know the blueprint of the way I want to build it, and I just use Cursor to get there faster, and then do the next thing, do the next thing, and then keep reiterating that. That's how you kind of like ship fast.
And like with shipping fast, how do you think personally? Because like when you're shipping normally, you have like a good idea of okay, that's how things are moving. With shipping fast, I think how do you manage documentation? Because you need to backtrack bugs, you need to ensure what features are there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's a learning process. I still haven't figured out the best workflow for this, but the way we kind of do it is when you vibe code using Cursor, or when you like using Cursor to augment the way you're shipping things, right? It often does a lot of things that you don't really like pay too much attention to, but it's just kind of like you would think it's boilerplate, it's just like slapping together a few stuff here and there. Definitely read everything you're committing. I think that's number one. And number two is it's really good at doing like 80 to 90% of the work. And it's not linear. Think of it more like a logarithmic scale. 80 to 90% it'll do it, but the last like 10 to 20% where you need to step in and like kind of fix things, that is where like a lot of time consuming stuff happens because now you kind of have no context of what it did, the 80% that it did. So you now need to go see how it did it, like be in that mind space, like, like understand like exactly what all the files are affected and how, like, what kind of edge cases that can happen. So that 10 to 20% that's missing today, uh, it will still take me like 50% or 40% of the time that would normally take me if I built it out myself. So you're still saving time, but it's not as, I guess, not as fast as, benchmarks kind of show it.
Fast and good. Interesting. Awesome, cool man. It was great having you on the pod. And anyone who wants to connect with any links will be in the description as well as in the comment. So you can connect with him. And yep, that's it.